So today we will have a quick look at the precautionary principle. How many of you already heard about this principle? Please raise your hands. Do you know what the If you have a look at the dictionary, you have precaution. Precaution means a measure taken in advance to prevent something dangerous, unpleasant or inconvenient from happening. He had taken the precaution of seeking legal advice. Where does it come from? It comes from Latin precavere, which means pre means before, and caver means beware of. For instance, you have cave canem, it means beware of the dog. So, this is an idea. Why using precaution? Of course, to tackle risk, uncertainty, ignorance. This guy is Frank Knight, who wrote this book in 1921, which is named Risk, Uncertainty, and Profit. Some years before this book, there was also the other book, who had already some ideas that we can find in Knight. And so suppose you have three events, A, B, and C, and three possible outcomes, and some probability. For instance, 0.4, 0.4, and 0.2. There is a mistake there. There is a comma rather than a point. And what Knight said is that we have to make difference between risk and uncertainty. What is risk? The risk is when probabilities are known. Okay? What is uncertainty, according to Knight, is that probabilities are unknown. Hence, we need to make a subjective assessment. Let's do some examples. In this case, what could you say about this case? Is it a case of uncertainty or risk? Risk. Because the probability are known. If the dice are fair, of course. What about this game? Roulette. Is it a risk or uncertain? Risk. You know you have 36 numbers plus 0. And so you can calculate the probability of getting one number or the other. Risk. What about an avalanche? What about the stock exchange? The value of is it uncertainty? We didn't know the future value of some stock. We cannot have an objective probability. This is Knight and uncertainty. Okay, we have to say that in economics, but in general in decision theory, we have these two guys, De Finetti and Savage, who are one Italian and another American economists, mathematicians, who said this difference is meaningless because in any case, what is important is the individual assessment of probability about future events. Okay, so we don't care about distinguishing between risk and uncertainty, because even in uncertain situation, individuals can do some assessment. So from a decision theory, it is this distinction is not important. And they define probability in terms of the subjective estimate of probability. That is the degree of confidence or doubt that a decision maker has in the outcome. So in terms of the decision theory, these two guys emphasize that this distinction, this Knightian distinction, is not important. And there are also nice papers in the literature, if you want to see, about the different differences between the Knight position, which was also by John Maynard Keynes, and the subjectivist idea about probabilities. There are really, if you search on the web Definiti Savage and Knight, you will get also very recent papers discussing many philosophical issues connected to this. But just this is not so important. You know, I guess, what risk neutrality is. Do you know what risk neutrality is? To be risk neutral. I have a lottery. And I can win WH with probability P and WL with probability 1 minus P. And, of course, what is the expected value? The expected value, the average value, is the weighted sum of the two. That is P times WH plus 1 minus P times WHL. However, this is different from the value that those money has for us. Okay? So usually economists are used to assess everything in terms of expected utility. That is, what is the utility of WH? What is the utility of WL? So what is risk neutrality? Is that if I am indifferent between playing the lottery and gaining the average, or not, or getting the same amount with certainty. Suppose that you can play and you can win either 1 and 7 or 4 and 4. What is the average gain? If probability is 50-50, what is the average?
8.
So, in one case, 8 is a total. Okay? Suppose that A and B. And this is these are two different bets.
P and 1.
So one, in this case, suppose that you buy a ticket of the lottery and you pay €1, and then or you pay €2. In case you have 50% of probability of getting €1 back or €7 back. So the average gain is 1 plus 7 is 8 divided 2 if the events have the same probability. Okay, so the expected gain is 4. If you don't buy the ticket, you will have 4 before and for after the event. Okay? So risk neutrality is that you are indifferent between buying the ticket or not buying the ticket. Okay? Someone raised hands. No. Is it fine? Is it clear? Okay? So this is risk neutrality. Huh? That is, of course, you are risk averse if you prefer not to play that lottery. In order to play the lottery, it must be that the average gain of playing the lottery must be higher than the sum that you get with certainty. And so you have risk aversion, and then you can have risk propension. You can be risk lover. And of course, you can have different position according also to the sum that you can win. Maybe you ask risk lover, you are risk lover for a low amount of money, and you are risk averse for a big amount of money, and so on. But in general, we have these three ideas: risk neutrality, risk aversion, and risk propension. What is precautionary principle? Actually, it is within many international treaties, and it is about the compatibility between technological development and the control of the risks associated to that development. And the principle says that we need to care about environment and health while adopting technology and taking into account both present and future generation, and the ethical need of discussing about the opportunity of manipulating the environment and life. We have new technology, we have new development. They can be very helpful, but at the same time we don't know the consequences of all of that. So this general principle is that we need to be somehow risk averse. But it's not only like only this. So, and this principle is within many international treaties, the precautionary principle. And somehow it is similar to risk aversion. We have a new technology. This new technology can be risky, can be harmful. So we need carefully to assess the risks. So why is that? What follows is taken from the first paper in the scientific journal, which is named Ecological Economics. It was the editorial, the first number, and it was a kind of program of the journal, for the journal. And in this paper, Bob Costanza, who was one of the founder of the society and of the journal, did this example. Suppose that, often we have two different attitudes. Now, optimism and pessimism. Have you also, in the debates, in the media, it is often said, you are pessimist. No, you are optimist. Okay? And we have usually this technological optimism and technological pessimism. The optimist says that economic growth is good, and technology will fix all the problems that we have from technology. So we don't have to care very much, just maximize economic growth, and everything will go. The other one is, but on the other side we have pessimists that says resources are given. There are limits to growth from pollution. There are social limits to growth, and the rest. So this juxtaposition, is it meaningful? In the debate, every day, you always have these two categories. The idea, and my reading of the paper, is that such a juxtaposition is nonsense. It is much better to think in terms of scenarios. Now we will see how. Suppose that you can do some policies. One policy which is based on optimism and another one based on pessimism. Take climate change. Will we have very serious consequences, very serious damages from climate change? Maybe yes, maybe not. I don't care about my assessment of damages, a precise assessment of damages. I don't know. Okay? So I can do policies if I believe that I can do, if I'm optimist, I don't do anything. If I'm pessimist, I use a lot of resources, I do a lot of laws or whatever to contrast climate change. So I can do these two different policies. One very active for solving the problem, or another one not very active. So the issue is, who is right? Are right the optimists or are right the pessimists? So what are the possible outcomes of the four combinations? So what will occur? We can do this kind of matrix. What will be the outcome in case we do policies based on optimism and optimists are right? We don't waste money, we don't waste resources to contrast climate change. And actually, climate change does not have very bad effects. Eventually, we can grow tomatoes and grapes in Germany or in UK. Okay, so for Germany it will be very good because they will have tropical fruits in Hamburg. So in this case, this is the best possible outcome. The question is, what about policy based on pessimism? Active policies against climate change? The outcome is moderate. And the reason is because we lose some resources, some money to contrast climate change, and this is useless. Is it clear that we have a lower outcome? What about optimist policies in the case when pessimists are right? What will occur? What will be the outcome? We don't do anything against climate change, and pessimists are right. That is, climate change is very harmful. Yes. The worst possible outcome may be a disaster. We haven't taken precautions. What about the fourth box? Of course, we will to spend money, to use resources, but at least the damage, the outcome is tolerable. Okay? So of course everything depends on the figures within the table. So what would you do? This is the next issue. Okay? Suppose that, as before, on average, it is the average outcome is the same. Suppose that here you have 8, here you have 4, and here you have 0. I suppose that five and 3. Okay? So what is the outcome in case that there is 50% and 50% of probability of optimist or pessimist to be right? So of course, the policies based on pessimism give an average, an expected outcome of 4. The policies based on optimism give an average outcome of 4. What would you do if you were to decide? Who would do optimist policies? Raise your hands, please. Who would do a pessimist policy based on pessimism? Raise your hands. And the others? The others indifferent, so let's try again. Who is for pessimist policies? Raise your hands. Or stand up if you want. Who would vote for optimist policies? 1. And the other? No, it doesn't work. You have to vote. All of you has to vote. Who is indifferent? Please raise your hands. 1. No, few votes. It's too many people not voting. So let's start again. Who is for optimist policies? Raise your hands. 1, 2, 2, 3. Who is for pessimist policies? Raise your hands. Who is indifferent? Okay, most of you voted. Is my question ethically legitimate? Think to this. Please answer to this question. The question that I ask you is ethically legitimate, and to which extent? You can't answer this question because it's very vague. When is my question legitimate? When can you decide to be risk lover? Yes.
When you know all the outcomes possible.
No, but you know all the possible outcomes here. So you voted for optimist policies, right? Yeah. Yes. When can you vote and decide for optimist policies? When those outcomes refers to whom? Suppose that those outcomes refers to you. Can you choose optimist policies? Yes.
Yeah.
Suppose those outcomes are related to your kids. Can you decide for your kids to be risk lover? Maybe not.
Maybe not, but maybe till appropriate age I decided for them.
Yeah.
And after.
Yeah, after we will see.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you wanted to say something.
Yeah, when it deals with people's life, you
Yeah.
cannot decide if it's going to be a maximum, if it's going to be perfect, or
Yeah.
a complete disaster.
Yeah. So the issue is this: you can risk with your own stake. Okay, if it's a private decision about participating in a lottery, and you want to bet your house. I want to do this bet and want to bet my house. Can you bet your house? Can you put as a stake your house? Yes, provided you are alone. Suppose that your partner, you live in your house, you have a family, and your partner go to gamble and lose the house. Would you like this? So your partner has not the right of taking a risky decision on you. So the issue is this: if you are on your own and it's your own private decision, and the consequences of your decision falls only on you, then you are free of doing what you want. I will try to jump out the window in order to see if I'm able to survive, and I'm a very good jumper, and how to say this sport. So the issue is we are discussing about policy, about public policies, about fighting climate change, or allowing gold mining, or forbidding gold mining, or whatever. So it is deciding about the lives and the stakes of other people. So if you are a politician, you cannot take a risky decision. So this is my point. So independently of who is going to be right, independent of that, so I don't care very much about who is going to be right, whether optimist or pessimist. We can have different scenarios. And the idea is that for public decision, for public policies, politicians, decision makers cannot use, must be risk averse. So even if climate change doesn't exist, even if climate change doesn't have so bad effects, there is also the possibility that the damage would be huge. So this debate among optimism and pessimism is meaningless. What do you think about my interpretation of that? In Italian law, we have this idea of the decision taken by a good how do we say? A father of family, which means the boss of the family. No? How would you choose if you were the head of the household? Il buon padre di famiglia, the good father of the family. And so I think this idea is important. How would you choose for your kids? If you are a good parent, a parent that cares about the sons, the children. I don't know, in your law, in your private law, how is it? In Italy, this metaphor is about responsible conduct. In order to avoid, so I took all the precaution, I behaved in a safe way, and nonetheless, something bad occurred. But I am in a good position because I behaved as a buon padre di famiglia, as a good head of the household. And it is, on the contrary, if you behaved not in a proper way, then your position is at risk, because in this case you can be thought as responsible of the bad outcome. Criticism against the precautionary principle is this one. That is, if you apply precautionary principle, then you won't do anything. It is a very common criticism against precautionary principle. This is not true. To use a precautionary principle does not imply not to do anything, does not imply inaction. Okay? The precautionary principle is not do not cross the road because you might be hit eaten by a car. It is just watch before crossing the road. Okay? And now we will read together this strange, an example of that. So please read those sentences. So first of all, this is an important declaration. Then you will have to guess who did this declaration. It is not possible to find hard evidence that something is going to happen. What is about that? It's about the proof. To find the proof is difficult. We know that tobacco, cigarette smoke, is very harmful. It took 30 years, more than 30 years or 40 years, to have a proof of the danger, of the harm coming from the cigarette smoking. Okay? So it says it is very difficult to prove. What's this sentence is again about the difficulty of proving. Even after the fact that is there, someone could say, there is not enough evidence. You don't have proof beyond a reasonable doubt. You will know an event occurred, but even after it occurs, it's very difficult to get perfect evidence. As you know, many people, luckily not so many, but still deny that climate change exists. And they confuse climate change with warming. No? Okay. However, our goal is not to go into a court of law and try to prove something to somebody. It is a task of taking these disparate pieces and putting them together so that people can make their own judgment. It's not for us to prove anything. What they have to do is they have to say, what does a reasonable person conclude are the risks from this? Okay? So you can see this is very much precautionary principle. We are not able to do a proper assessment. The burden of proof is always, the proof is always very difficult to find. Now, so first the methodology. We need to use precautionary principle. Are the risk graders of the UN, for example, trying to enforce their resolution? So the context is politics. We have a resolution from the United Nations. Okay? Should the UN try to enforce their resolution? As you know, UN does a lot of resolutions, but then it's very difficult to enforce the resolutions. Okay? Now, the issue is about enforcing the resolution. So we have some risk in enforcing and some risks in not enforcing the resolution. So, which risks are greater? Shall we do or shall we not do? Where is the risk higher, in doing or not doing? Always there are risks on both sides. Okay? If you read these sentences, you might think that this person, of course, this person is going to apply a precautionary principle. You could also think about an environmentalist, a person who cares very much about the environment and says that we need to use precaution. Okay? Do you agree that these sentences could be said also by an environmentalist, by any person who wants to use a precautionary principle, for instance, for fighting climate change? I don't know very well how much the temperature will rise. I don't know very well about the costs of the climate changes, but it's better not to take high risks. I want to minimize the risks. Okay? And actually, those sentences were said by Donald Rumsfeld, who was the Secretary of Defense of the Bush administration, President Donald Rumsfeld. It was a Pentagon briefing aired on September 26, 2002. And the purpose of this briefing was to justify the war against Iraqi. And Iraqi they had the suspect that the Iraqi had chemical weapons, which was not true. And so the idea is that, look, one option is not doing anything. And if Iraqi has not chemical weapon, that's the best possible outcome. As in our matrix before. We are optimists, we don't do anything, we don't go to a war against Iraqi, and that's fine. But if Saddam Hussein has chemical weapons, what will occur? Oh, this is very risky. So we need to go and immediately make a war against Saddam Hussein, against Iraqi, even a lot of civilians will die, and so on. Because it is the less risky action. Okay, and this is rather paradoxical because the United States do not recognize the precautionary principle when it is applied to sustainable development and when it is applied to environment. You can have a lot of statements where you can understand that the precautionary principle is not very popular in American institutions. And so it is always interesting to notice. In some cases, you apply the precautionary principle. In some other cases, you don't apply it. And as you know, for Kyoto Protocol, the US didn't support the Kyoto Protocol, and this is, but they support the precautionary principle if you have to start a war against Saddam Hussein. And of course, in the US, there are a lot of people as well that like the precautionary principle. And actually, you will see in the slides that there was an important conference in support of the precautionary principle in the United States and so on. But so the reason why I'm telling this story is not because I believe that Rumsfeld was wrong. This approach is completely legitimate because he say if Saddam Hussein has a lot of chemical weapons, this is very risky for everyone. Saddam, how do you say? What is the pronunciation? Yes, the name is. He was killed in the war. How do you say? Saddam Hussein. Hussein. And so the issue is to be consistent. Okay? This is completely legitimate perspective. Because if you think that it's very risky for the US or for the world and so on, you are legitimate to adopt this approach. But at the same time, you should adopt the same approach for all issues. Not only for some issues you use the precautionary principle, and if you talk about petrochemicals or about genetically modified agriculture and so on, then in this case you don't use the precautionary principle. So my point is that we need to be consistent. Either I like precautionary principle or I don't like and I don't use it. But not just in some when it's good for me I use it and when it's not I don't use it.